Hi, and welcome to week 7 of the climate vulnerability training as a part of the CVI-Africa project. My name is Scott Heron, and I am the unit coordinator for unit number 7. From this week, at the end of this week's training, which culminates in the live discussion, you should understand the types of businesses associated with your World Heritage property of interest, how the CVI process considers economic, social and cultural aspects in the assessment of community vulnerability, and where opportunities will arise for new information to be determined. So where there are knowledge gaps or communication gaps with stakeholders. This week's overview, we have this pre-recorded video. We have perhaps 10 minutes of recommended reading, and we have our live face-to-face meeting on Thursday the 15th of July at 0900 hours Universal Time. Please note that there is an assignment for you to prepare and bring to that discussion time, and we'll go into more details about that at the end of this video. So looking back for a moment on where we've come in recent weeks with the CVI process. The CVI process has helped us to define key values for each of the properties, has helped us to determine which climate stresses have the greatest impact upon the World Heritage values, and has given us some ideas and learnings about the assessments of exposure, sensitivity and adaptive capacity relating to the key climate stresses, and therefore the vulnerability of the OUV. So once again, that's looking back, and this is the first part of the framework that was considered last week. And this week, we're looking at the second part of the CVI framework. So as we analyze economic, social, and cultural connections, we first want to define what these mean. The economic connections consider business types directly associated with the World Heritage property. So that might include a bus tour that occurs on the property, but it wouldn't include the airline that brings someone to the region of the property. Social interactions. These consider different people groups, locals, domestic visitors, and international visitors, but importantly, they must use or have visited the World Heritage property. So interaction is a key word there. Finally, we look at cultural identity, and this considers all types of cultural connections, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, with the World Heritage property. Importantly, these connections don't have to involve an interaction with the property, a visit to the property, or the use of the property. You can have a cultural connection with a location without ever having been there. So one of the things that we've learned through the CVI applications is that it is really useful to have a specific scenario laid out based on the key climate stresses when we assess the economic, social, and cultural connections. So to give you some examples here, for Shark Bay, Western Australia, you'll see down the left-hand side at the beginning of those lines, the 3 key climate stresses identified were extreme temperature events, storm intensity and frequency, and air temperature increase. And in that analysis, a decision was made to consider the frequency of extreme temperature events to be 5 per decade at the time frame of the assessment, so that's in the 2030 to 2050 period, a doubling of the frequency of severe storms, and an air temperature increase by 1 degree Celsius. So that helped the members of the workshop to consider what the economic, social, and cultural impacts and effects might be. Another example from a cultural property this time. Here you can see that in this workshop, the focus was on the elements of the property. Skara Brae is a Neolithic housing area. Maze Howe is a tomb, and the Ring of Brodgar is a set of stones in a circle. And so the focus was on impacts upon those properties, but impacts that were linked to the key climate stresses, and those are shown in brackets after each of the 3 points. Finally, the Wadden, again looking forward to 2050, considered the 3 climate stresses: sea level rise, temperature trend, and extreme temperature events. And you can see there the information from climate projections that was used to help participants consider the future scenarios. So as we go to economics, what we want to do is consider the business types associated with a World Heritage property. And these might include or fall into categories like tourism or events, the goods and services provided by the property, such as fisheries or agriculture, government institutions or education and research activities involving the property, conservation actions and the activities of non-government organisations may also be relevant business types. So these are economic entities involved with the property. What we want to do in a workshop, in an application of the CVI, is to compile some representative information about those business types. And so that might include an estimated economic value. It could include the number of people engaged in that business type, but it is important that we look at the level of reliance of these business types upon the World Heritage values. Because again, through the whole CVI process, we're looking through the lens of World Heritage values. To give you an example, from the Wadden application of the CVI, tourism was one of the business types that was identified. And you can see here that there were some components of tourism that were specifically noted. You can see some comments there that around 1/6 of all visitors come because of the national park status or the World Heritage status of the different areas of the Wadden property. And you can see there's some information there regarding the number of people engaged, the economic value, and this dependence metric. And on the next slide, I'd like to take a little bit further journey on this idea and give you an example of what this can look like. So here you see before us some of the business types that were identified for the old and new towns of Edinburgh World Heritage property. And there's a picture of the property in the lower corner there. Now, for each of these business types, we invited the participants to rank them from the lowest dependence upon the World Heritage values to the highest dependence upon the World Heritage values. And you can see there that some of these rankings were very consistent across the group. Tourism in the bottom right-hand corner. Events was fairly consistent. And so events there consists of festivals that are involved, that take place inside the city, and other activities, concerts, for example. We can also see that finance and legal, the finance and legal business types that operate within the city, they had a very low dependence on the World Heritage values according to the broader group. And then in between those, there are some that have a bit of a distribution, like education. Some people saw it as having a lowest dependence, others saw it as having quite a high level of dependence upon the World Heritage values, and there was a distribution in between. This is going to be a task that you'll be undertaking in preparation for our live discussion. The next of these economic, social, and cultural components is the social component. And here we consider, as we said before, the different people groups, locals, domestic visitors, and international visitors. And we look at the aspects of their interactions with the property, with the World Heritage values. In our live discussion, we're going to go into some more detail about the social components. And we also have, as we mentioned, the cultural components. These assessments are also made for the same people groupings, locals, domestics, and internationals. But this assessment is about identity, and it doesn't actually require the use or visitation of the World Heritage property, as I mentioned previously. Again, we will be discussing these in further detail during our live discussion time. So what do we do with these economic, social, and cultural pieces? For each of these, we assess the dependency upon the key values here. So we look at the future effect of the loss of World Heritage values due to the key climate stresses on the economic, social, and cultural elements. So this is looking and saying, how much loss could there be going forwards? Or perhaps how much gain could there be because of climate impacts on World Heritage values? Adaptive capacity does not look to the future, but instead looks now. It's the capacity now to adapt in the face of the loss of World Heritage values due to the key climate stresses. So this might be the capacity that a business type has to change its practice and be able to still function as a thriving business. Or it might be how people's cultural connections with the property have to modify because of the changing landscape of World Heritage values, and whether or not those cultural connections will have that capacity to modify, to adapt. So finally, we see here with this assessment of community vulnerability, that takes us to the end of our framework. And when we do these assessments, we look at the economic, social, and cultural dependencies. We bring those together, and again, using a risk matrix approach, we use that assessment in combination with the already defined OUV vulnerability to give us the potential impact upon the community. And then we look at the adaptive capacities from the economic, social, and cultural components, combine those together, and again, in a risk matrix approach, that leads us to an assessment for the community vulnerability. Now, I did mention that you have an assignment task. So for this, we're asking you to think about your property, think about the economic uses that are associated with your property and the connections that come from market economics, so business types. And we would like you to come up with a list of no more than 8 business types that are associated with your nominated World Heritage property of interest. Importantly here, this is not a particular business. It's not Joe's fish and chip shop, but it might be restaurateurs as a broader level, or retail industry as being that broader business type. It's not a particular bus tour, Jemima's bus tours, but rather it could be tourism, day tourism even, could be the business type that you consider. Once you have your list, we want you to rank these in order of their dependence upon the World Heritage values. And so we saw before examples of some business types being considered to have a high measure of dependence upon the World Heritage values for that property. Others existing within the property, but not depending upon the World Heritage values. And so we ask that you please rank these and package that together in your presentation. And again, we're looking for an about 2-minute presentation with slides describing the business types. And if you would like to include some representative photographs, you're welcome to. There is no template provided for this task, and we expect it will not take more than an hour, not even an hour. But please do upload your completed file to the Canvas site. Finally, we do recommend that you continue your reading from this resource that remains available on Canvas and is linked to again in the week 7 time. So here, this will be reading page 148, which it relates to the OUV vulnerability and community vulnerability assessments. Finally, once again, we'd like to acknowledge the project partners in the CVI-Africa project, as well as the funders. Thanks very much. I look forward to seeing you in our live discussion. Bye now.